A little girl waves at a police officer. What happens next changed her life forever. A warm, safe home and a loving family seem to be things that we take for granted, a defining life feature for most of us that some unlucky children only dream of. Little children left to fend for themselves as their parents are simply not up to the task of raising a kid. Unfortunately, those kids find themselves alone with no one to turn to, and so lose hope in a society that simply doesn't care about them. Yet there are cases in which unexpected heroes turn up to save those kids and change their lives forever with simple gestures. Today's story is about such a hero, but before we start, make sure to subscribe if you haven't and hit that notification bell so you won't miss any new stories. It all started with a 9-year-old girl named Clyn Scales, who lived in a poor neighborhood, western Kansas City, in late 1990s. In a neighborhood ruled by street gangs and violence, Clyn shared their house with her 2 brothers and their drug-addicted mother. Having her life ruled by addiction, Clyn's mother neglected her kids and even left them alone, unattended for days at a time. Social services have the family in their records, yet they failed to offer proper help, as the 3 little kids spent days without food in the absence of their neglectful mother. Being the eldest of the 3, Clyn found herself in charge of her 2 younger siblings, and so pushed by hunger and the absence of an adult to turn to, Clyn made a habit of sneaking into a nearby 7-Eleven convenience store and stealing food. Clyn didn't enjoy being a shoplifter, as she stole just enough to calm her hunger and that of her brothers in order to avoid starving to death. When at home, Clyn was in the habit of sitting by the window and watching people and cars passing by in the street. One constant feature about that was the police officer, who would always pass by, confidently walking in his beautiful uniform, and look at the window as if he knew Clyn would be there waiting for him. Clyn got used to that, and so she always waited for the police officer to walk by at around the same time. And so excited to see him, the little girl waved at the police, who smiled and waved back every time. The whole thing became a routine, as unbeknown to little Clyn, that police officer named Jeffrey Colvin was contacted about the little food thief, and after looking into the case, he learned about the addicted mother and the 3 kids who were suffering of her carelessness. As a result, Patrol Officer Colvin made it his duty to always pass by the old East Patrol Division near 27th and Van Brunt, East Kansas City, and check at the 3 kids living there and make sure that they're fine. The friendly waving turned into a first meeting when Jeff knocked on the family's house door. And when Clyn opened the door, the police officer told her that he was always around if she or her brothers needed any help, and they can always call him. The 2 even made a pinky promise that Colvin would always check on Clyn and her 2 brothers. Officer Colvin became Clyn's best friend, as he occasionally dropped by to bring the kids some candy. Clyn recalls the officer asking her after she came back from school, "How'd you do at school today? What'd you learn?" Officer Colvin became the only figure that Clyn could trust and depend on, even when she was at home alone, scared. She would recall that Colvin must be around, and it always helped. That friendship would change the little girl's life forever. One day, as Officer Colvin was on patrol, he heard Clyn's address dispatched on the police radio for a Children's Division call. Concerned for the little girl and her brother's safety, Colvin drove to their house, and upon arrival he noticed that Clyn wasn't in her usual spot by the window, which meant that something was wrong with her. Colvin parked his car and rushed towards the house. When one of Clyn's brothers opened the door for him, he immediately noticed the little girl laying on the ground, unresponsive. Colvin picked the girl up and put her in his patrol car, along with her 2 brothers, and rushed her towards the hospital. Doctors, later on, confirmed that it was Colvin's intervention at the right time that saved the little girl's life. Clyn was so malnourished that she fainted. Clyn was hospitalized for a while before being discharged into the state's custody along with her brothers, as their mother, who was struggling with her addiction, apparently couldn't be trusted with the 3 kids anymore. It was then when the 2 friends lost contact of each other, as the 3 kids were moved away and Colvin didn't know where they were. The police officer always remembered little Clin every time he passed by her house, yet he couldn't do anything. Years went by and Officer Colvin patrolled the streets of eastern Kansas City until he went into a well-deserved retirement. In 2015, Colvin was contacted by a former colleague called Jennifer Jones, who asked him to meet her for some important matter. When Colvin arrived at the meeting place, he couldn't believe his eyes, as in front of him stood a beautiful young woman with a sweet smile that he instantly recognized. The young woman rushed towards Officer Colvin once she saw him, and the two tearfully hugged. After she was rescued, Scales and her brothers were placed in state custody. The young woman was Clin, who, after 20 years, looked for the man she considered her guardian angel and found him. Clin didn't know the full name of her favorite police officer, and she tried looking for him on social media, as well as all open databases of police officers, before her search was picked up by Jennifer Jones, who said she might know who Clin was searching for, and so she arranged the meeting. The girl remembered every word Officer Colvin told her and his positive influence. She remembered him telling her to never give up and how he saved her life 20 years ago. When they reunited, Colvin gave Clin a bracelet that he wore until it broke, and the girl immediately recognized it, as she remembers Officer Colvin wearing that bracelet on his left wrist. In exchange, Clin presented her hero with a placket that reads, "A promise made, a promise kept, walking in the footsteps of a true hero." Clin was so influenced by what Officer Colvin did for her that she decided to become a police officer herself. And on the day of their reunion, she had one more favor to ask Colvin. She said that on the day of her graduation from the police academy, she wanted Colvin to pin her badge on her. As usual, Officer Colvin always kept his promises, and on the day of her graduation, he drove all the way to Galveston, Texas to Scales Police Academy graduation and pinned a badge on the uniform of the new, proud police officer. During the ceremony, both Clin and Colvin were so emotional, as the police officer said, "I was proud of her. She really beat all statistical odds to get where she was. Most people would look at her 9-year-old self and basically write her off and say, 'This girl doesn't have a chance in the world. She's not going to amount to anything.' She obviously proved everyone wrong there." Being a police officer herself at Galveston Police Department, Clin described the event as the biggest accomplishment in her life. She said that Colvin is the one who always made her want to be like him. Clin badly wants to be like Jeff Colvin to another person. Now she wants to do her bit in making the world a better place to someone else. Clin teamed up with a paramedic she recently met, who himself was rescued by another hero from a childhood of abuse and neglect. And the two aspire to start a nonprofit to encourage children who are abused or neglected to overcome those challenges. Clin is now a police officer and a proud mother of 2 beautiful children, all thanks to the hope given to her by a police officer who simply followed his heart and believed that a young girl deserved the love and the care her parents prevented her. A simple action, a little word, even a wave, can change the life of another person. People are placed into each other's lives for a reason, so let it be to change their lives for the better. Thank you for watching. If you liked the video, don't forget to leave a thumbs up and tell us what you think about it in the comment section below.